biggest part of our show for today is the NBA Awards. We're going to go through our awards, all the major awards, do our all NBA teams, as the season is obviously basically quantifiably over at this point, other than the 8 games, which doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so let's see. There we go. There we go. It glitched out for a moment. My apologies. Okay, so MVP, who do you have?
I went with Giannis also.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty consensus. I think
Yeah.
that's about as surefire as you can get. I think it's pretty much a lock. I mean, you could make the argument for LeBron, but I just think the talent surrounding Giannis is so much less.
hmm
So
I
that's why I
so
lean that
so
way.
here's my thing though. If we played the last 30 games of the season, did LeBron have a serious case potentially after the 30 games?
I mean, I think I mean, I like I said, I think you can make the argument for LeBron. I just don't see. I'm just looking at team talent too. That to me,
Huh.
that's what plays a lot into MVP. And like I said, I just think Giannis is playing. He doesn't have Anthony Davis. You know what I mean? He
hmm
doesn't have that real bona fide star next to him. That's why I lean that way. LeBron's stats have been really good, and I think a lot of LeBron's accolades this year, or not accolades, but stats and stuff, attribute to having that year off. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, pretty
I,
much a year off with the playoffs last year. Yeah.
exactly. I think he's really refreshed. That's also probably why I lean towards Giannis, is because he was deep in the playoffs last year too and still performed at a really high level. So
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you keep bringing up. It's because I think this is probably one of his best years of his career just as a whole. I mean,
yeah.
him playing at this level at this age is just ridiculous. But I think you're right. It's definitely a huge reason why.
hmm
Rookie of the year, John Morant.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty simple. That could have changed with Zion, but at the same time, he would have played about 45, 50 games. Ja would have played about maybe 75. I think that alone.
Yeah, not enough games for me, but then you factor in also that Jaws got his team in a playoff spot, is when we were expecting nothing from the Grizzlies, is also huge. So
Yeah. What do you like about John Morant's game? What stood out to you this year?
um I think what impressed me more or less was his ability to get others involved. I think he's a very efficient like point guard in the fact that he really gets his teammates involved. I was more expecting him to be kind of an explosive scorer out of college, maybe more similar to Westbrook. Not that Westbrook doesn't get his teammates involved. I mean, I think you and me differ on that. I think Westbrook does get his teammates involved, but I think I was expecting less of that from Ja. I was
Mhm.
expecting more of, kind of one-on-one isolation, but he really seems to be able to drive and dish pretty well, which is
Mhm.
that part of his game has impressed me this year. I mean, obviously, when you talk about a guy like that, you talk about energy level and stuff like that. Confidence, which is that's why he's exciting to watch to me, is because of the kind of anger that he plays with. But more or less getting the other guys involved, because he's got a good young couple pieces around him. Dylan
Jaren
Brooks,
Jackson Jr., Brandon
Triple
Clark, for
J,
example.
Brandon Clark, yeah. So I mean, they're building a good young core, and I think the more he gets those guys involved, the less of the load he'll have to shoulder. You know what I mean? And that can help him kind of stray away from, like I said, kind of a Westbrook type role where it's kind of all on his shoulders.
Yeah. I really liked his game this year, but I loved watching the Grizzlies this year. I had a really fun time watching them this year. Just I love seeing this young team grow. They have a potential in the next 5 years to really show out, especially as this league changes to become more
They
of a
do.
younger league.
They were really exciting, more than just a league pass team. You know what I mean? That you
Yeah.
kind of just watch on a Thursday night, but yeah, I really enjoy this team, and I think they got, like I said, young potential there. That's, I think, is going to be a problem in the West for a while if they can keep those core pieces together.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, if Zion did play a couple more games, are you willing to, like? Because
It,
for
it,
me, I'm not even willing to, like,
If
But
he again,
over
if he played
everything.
about 75, if he played a full season, Zion would have won. There's no question.
You
But
think just based off of the hype though, or just
no, I
let
actually think
let let's say seeding stays the same, where Grizzlies are still in the 8th spot, Zion's what are they 10th?
yeah.
So let's say it stays that way. Are you still willing to?
If let's say they both play about 75, 80 games, Zion would have won. And I honestly, and this is not just like, oh, it's like, oh, people would have picked Ja or whatever, or most people would have picked Ja. No, I'm telling you, the media would have taken Zion. There's no question.
Would you have though?
Yes,
Would
I would have.
you would have?
I think that him, and we've obviously, it's a small sample size, and obviously there's so much hype around him. I bought into it. I'm a Zion head now. I
Yeah,
love Zion, but I'll be honest. I just think you can't look at his skill set. You can't look at the impact he would have had. I mean, look, if he played a full season, you would have had Brandon Ingram, who was incredible. Jackson Hayes as another young player who's still developing, right? Lonzo was a lot better in the second half of the season than he was in the first half.
I
I
think
think
that
if he played a full season, and
I think
and
that's
Lonzo would have,
attributed to Zion too.
right.
I think Lonzo stepping up is because of Zion.
Right, absolutely. I think Lonzo's much better when Zion's on the floor for sure. So I do think that no matter how the standings would have looked, and if you look even down my list, there's a few players that didn't even make the playoffs that are on this list. But I really think Zion would have won, no question, by the media. I don't think it would have been close.
It's fair.
But you don't feel the same way?
No, if the standings were to stay the same, I'd lean towards Ja. I think just
Mm-hmm.
because of uh really what we were expecting from Memphis was bottom of the standings, and I think he's got pieces there. But I don't think they equate to what the Pelicans have. I think Brandon Ingram was closer towards being a finished product much more than Triple J, Jaren Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
or Brandon Clark or
Brandon Clark
Dylan
is still in
Brooks.
the developmental stage, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he didn't get
So
too many minutes.
I mean, you're talking about pieces that are just closer to a finished, way closer to a finished product for me than Zion had with him. And New Orleans did a good job of going out and getting some veterans too to help out. Like JJ Redick and stuff like that. So I mean, to me, if the standings stay the same, I'm just not willing to take wins away from a guy when
Mm-hmm.
when
Yeah.
he's still putting up excellent numbers and his team's in a better spot. That to me is worth more in this type of award system than if let's say I were to build around a guy, you know what I mean, then I'm
Yeah.
taking. But
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. Defensive Player of the Year, I went Anthony Davis. Look, you could take Giannis. He won MVP. I'm going to change it up and give AD the award. I have a tough time with Defensive Player of the Year. I think it's changed over time, right? It was much easier back in, 2011, 2012, where defense still felt like much more a priority. Like, I had a
yeah,
tough time with this award because it's not the same, right? It's not the same as it used to be. This is such more of an offensive centric league, of course, with the three ball. Defense doesn't seem as important. I mean, you have guys like Trae Young who really don't have much in terms of defense, but they're still like incredible players. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, exactly. I think this award has gotten hard to, like you said, kind of hard to judge talent of, because I think there's also less players that are playing on the defensive end, like you said, less willing to until, let's say, the last 8 minutes of the game. You know what I mean? They're
Mm-hmm.
just, like you said, the league is transitioning to a more offensive uh, settings. But for me, I went Giannis here, and I think just because I think he offers a little bit more versatility than AD. He can guard a little bit smaller guys. His team also was 4 points higher on a defensive rating side. So the Bucks were the best overall defensive team. So I think you award that to him being the main cog in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think AD's a close second, because he was the main cog for his team defensively, and I think that was impressive for him to kind of speak up at the beginning of the year and say he wanted to be defensive player of the year, and really backed it up. Because like we said, a lot of guys don't play defense nowadays. But I think it would be cool to see Giannis win both these just because he would be the only one since Hakeem and MJ have done it. So there
Wow.
would be
Yeah.
three total that have won MVP and Defense Player of the Year. So that would be cool to see.
Yeah.
But I could see the argument for either or here.
Going back to the Bucks, they easily could have won 70 games.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be lost in history now, in the sense that they probably could have been, the third or fourth greatest team of all time in terms of regular season record-wise.
Mm-hmm.
But now I don't know if people are going to be looking back at this season and thinking, oh, we're going to give them that credit that they were on pace to win 70.
Yeah, I'm sure that's frustrating for them. It's frustrating for guys like you and me who really follow the NBA hard because, we, like you said, we lose some of these teams in history. And I think this was also a year that we kind of expected the Bucks to take a step back. I thought we thought they were going to win the East, but losing a piece like Malcolm Brogdon and stuff, we were kind of unsure if Middleton would have the same kind of year that he did. So we didn't really know what to expect. I didn't expect them to be in the chase for 70. And for a while there, it looked like they were going to be chasing the Warriors record, and they were going to be close. But yeah, I think this overall was a really efficient team that didn't get a whole lot of notice for being that efficient, and it's probably due to the lack of competition in the Eastern Conference.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's an accomplishment that's going to be lost, and it's a little bit upsetting. I think this whole year, regular season wise, is going to be a little bit lost just because of the coronavirus, though. It's going to be a little bit of a lopsided year, but there's bigger things that we had to deal with. So
Oh, for sure. Definitely. But yeah, I think the whole 70 games thing should be important. But again, with it being in the East, I'm not sure how viable that would have been, especially the playoffs. We're going to see it in Orlando when we get to the playoffs. It's going to be one of those things where, there's just so much talent in the West. It's going to be tough I think more than likely the Bucks find a way to get to the NBA Finals, but it's going to be tough whoever they match up with in the West.
yeah,
So it kind of depends if they win the title. And I really don't think this is one of these years where the title gets devalued at all. It shouldn't be. So whoever wins it will deserve it, unless some other things happen with the coronavirus. But I'm sure these players, as we've even said with Jared Dudley, they're going to protect LeBron and AD with their lives.
yeah.
There. So, yeah, I don't think the award the NBA Finals are going to be really devalued with this system. Do you feel that way?
That's what I was gonna kind of ask you. I know you just kind of spoke on it, but I don't know that we're gonna be able to get the best out of these guys being in a hotel for 3 months in Orlando, away from their families and all that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the level of play? Just because me and you, if I were to travel and I were to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks, I get a little stale.
Yeah.
It gets a little stale. So to me, it might be a little bit of a thing where it's kind of like, maybe some guys were burned out this year when we look back on it. You know what I mean? But I don't know if devalue is the right word. Maybe just, yeah, I guess it is the right word. I mean that because I don't know.
I
It's
don't
hard to
feel
say.
that way though.
You don't.
No, I don't. I think the only way that it's devalued, and I hope to God this doesn't happen, but the only way that it gets devalued is if so many guys test positive that it's not the same systems or rosters at all. That's the
Yeah.
only way. That's the only argument. So I guess it's almost to be determined in that way, because we just don't know, how that setup is going to look, how many players are going to be testing positive, you know, and all that stuff. So I think it also depends on that. That's something that people haven't talked about, but I really don't think so. I think it would be unfair after playing 50 some games to just say that the season is devalued.
Yeah, I'm more or less. I'm just worried about level of play. No fans. I'm sure. These guys are paid professionals. They know what they're doing. They're going to be going hard. I'm not necessarily worried about that, but I do wonder how much fans and refereeing I think will be different without the fans there. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that has something to play with it. But I think you make a really good point as far as we kind of have to wait on it to see if some of these guys do test positive, because then it depletes some of the rosters. Then you're right, it really does take away from some of it. That's something I haven't thought about really. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a wait and see type of thing, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I think Orlando's gonna be really fun, but I mean, look at how the Lakers are looking at this. As I mentioned, what Dudley's been saying, the Lakers are looking at this and saying, "Look, if we win this thing, we won the thing." And I
Yeah.
think like the Bucks, the Clippers, the Raptors, all these guys in those big hotels that I don't know why Shams talked about the hotels. That was weird. But all these teams that are up there in the top 4 or 5 are gonna care, and they're
Yeah,
gonna want to win.
I think probably once it gets down to it, I think the struggle you're gonna have is in the first couple of series. I think once it gets down to it, though, and you're in the Eastern Conference, Western Conference Finals, um, I think it'll ramp up a little bit, just because I think it justifies, kind of the weight and the struggle that people have been going through. You know what I mean? If you win it, then it really does kind of justify, maybe not the right word, but it
Yeah,
signifies that struggle. You know what I mean?
yeah,
That a lot of these guys were going through and training at their houses and stuff like that.
yeah.
So
I think, but I honestly do feel like it's a wait and see approach. But for right now, I do think it would be unfair to say that the NBA Finals is devalued just because of something that was out of their control.
yeah,
I just don't. I just don't
it's
see it.
fair.
All right, let's go six man. I had a tough time with six man. I went with Lou Will. What did you have for six man?
I went Dennis Schroeder.
All right, that's a good call.
Yeah,
I loved OKC this year. As a whole, Chris Paul was a great addition, but this team was a lot better than we expected as a whole.
yeah, a lot better. And that's kind of why I gave the nod to Schroeder here, because a guy coming off the bench, and I think that three guard set that they implemented really was like a a huge surprise benefit for this team. Not a lot of teams go small, like that small, 3 point guards on the floor with Shea and CP3. But I think that three guard set and Schroeder's numbers, and that combined with OKC's success, really, that's what made me lean this way. Also, I wanted to kind of differ from Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell, just because of the fact that I view those two as kind of a tandem. You know what I
Mm.
mean? It's a little bit hard for me to decipher one from another, which is why also I kind of lean that way. They're probably either one of those, Montrez or Lou, you are probably a little bit more of a six-man worthy. But I just think that three guard set that I'm talking about, that OKC kind of implemented with Schroeder coming off the bench, really shocked me with the success that they had. So that's why I kind of lean that way.
Yeah, I had a tough time with this award. I think you make a really good case for Schroeder. I just had a tough time with it because I mean the Clippers, obviously with Will and Harold, they're obviously always candidates for the award. But it's tough to kind of pick because I mean it can really depend on team success. But I do think you're kind of swaying me a little bit. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely a good argument for Schroeder. Uh,
Yeah, it's just for me, like you said, you can't weigh it a whole lot on team success, but this award has gotten really hard to judge, just because of the fact that a lot of these guys now, like Lou Will and Montrez, are starting to finish games, and Schroeder was finishing games that last couple minutes for OKC. With that three guard set, their crunch time lineup. So it's becoming more and more hard to decipher these type of guys. He might come off the bench, but if he's playing minutes like a starter, it's a little bit hard
yeah,
to judge. But
it was a weird award. Most improved. Who did you have?
I went Brandon Ingram.
Ooh, I went to Vontae Graham. Why did you go Brandon Ingram for you?
Um, I think just the leap in numbers, the leap in him having to kind of be the guy when he was in LA. He kind of got lost in the mix. I know you and me have had that talk where I think he was just getting kind of lost in LeBron's shadow, and I think here with Zion out the first half of the year too, he really had to step up and kind of be the guy, and his numbers were outstanding. He's always been able to score the ball, and I think this is finally the year he really popped. He was an all-star. He's gonna get paid like an all-star soon. This is a guy I'm just really happy for, and was really high on coming out of college, and I didn't want him to get lost in the fold of that whole kind of LA scenery and everything too. I know it's hard for some of those young guys.
Why
But
do
I
you
think
think that is? Why do you think that is? Because I've always found that weird. I mean, obviously LeBron there adds to the spectacle of it, but for guys like Ingram and Lonzo, they struggled in LA. Why do you think this is something that happens so often? I mean, even a guy like D'Angelo Russell struggled there. There was obviously other reasons, but why do you think LA is so tough for these young players to adjust to?
it's just a lot more pressure, and I say that vaguely, but it's just you're you're around media a lot more, you're in the spotlight a lot more, a lot of your games are broadcasted, you're really put in the spotlight as far as, you know, you're gonna be judged for just about everything. And I think also being in LA, what is critical about that is you're being watched off the court too. It's not just your performance. You're being watched off the court, whether it's getting into trouble, fashion, whatever. So there's a lot of extra kind of stigma and hype that comes with just being in LA. Where if you remove yourself from that scenery, probably a little bit of a refresh button for guys like Lonzo and Brandon Ingram, where they can kind of restart and get away from that kind of spotlight. But also, I've said this to you before, and you may or may not agree with it, but I think being a young guy on LeBron's team has always been hard. It's
Uh,
always been
no,
something
it's
where,
tough. It's hard because he likes guys that are older. He likes guys with experience. He's at that point now in his career where
yeah,
he's all about, like, why is Rondo on the team?
yeah,
Rondo is a guy that's, has experience, knows how to play in clutch moments. That's what he likes. He doesn't like younger guys. He wants guys with playoff experience because he's at that point of his career
and
where he
that's
wants
fair.
to compete for
That's
titles.
fair. He wants to win now, and I don't blame him for that. You know what I mean? It's just he's been in that win now mode for the last couple of years, and that's why some of these younger pieces and some of these teams have kind of folded, and it's not good to see, but it's just kind of the business. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I went with Devonte Graham. This is a little fantasy bias. I had him on my fantasy team. But here's the deal, man. This guy went from 4.7 points to 18.2 and 2.6 to 7.5. This is actually assists per game. My bad. But here's the thing. This Hornets team has almost nothing going for it. Almost nothing. But this season, this Hornets team was fun. Like, I legitimately enjoyed sitting down and watching the Hornets because I felt like, okay, you had Terry Rozier there. Devonte Graham played fantastic. Yes, he tailored off a bit, towards the end of the coronavirus, but this team had close games. I mean, this team had more often than not games that finished, 10 points or less. They were competitive. Yeah, they weren't going to win those games, but they were competitive. And a huge reason why is obviously Terry Rozier, but I also think Devonte Graham is a huge reason for that as well. Because I think his improvement made that team play just a whole lot better as a whole.
Well, I'll first start by saying I'm glad you got entertainment out of this team because you're probably one of the only people in the whole world that got entertainment out of watching this team. But I think the point you make that holds the most value is Devonte Graham was the lone bright spot for this team. Rozier, I think, got overpaid. He's a nice, piece to have, but it's not gonna win you games. This is a young guy that Devonte Graham being that can, you can start saying, okay, we have some pieces for the future where this Hornets team has been kind of lost in their direction the last couple of years. They had aging veterans with huge contracts. I think Nick Batum's still on one or 2 years on
Yeah.
that team. Once they clear up some of this cap, they can start to really rebuild and move forward. This guy did make a huge jump, especially from what we were used to seeing. Like you're saying, towards the end of the year, he did kind of tailor off a little bit and kind of slow down. But it's probably more or less because game plans, become more advanced and more scouting reports on a guy like this. And if he's the only guy on the team that you really have to worry about, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But he
I,
seemed to really handle a bigger role, and he was, to me, the one fun player on this team to watch.
yeah, I really think they're going to be focusing long term on this Rozier Graham combo. I think it would be beneficial to them to focus on that. I also think that part of it was, I mean, he was playing literally 2 minutes per game last season. I think it was about 2-3 minutes, and then they bumped him up to 30. Right. I think
Yeah,
one of the things, them losing Kemba, I think was the best thing to happen to this organization. Because I feel like now they can sort of reset and say, if they paid Kemba, they would have been in luxury tax like heck for years.
yeah,
So they had to reset, and they needed a guy, like they needed, as you said, like a bright spot to really start to say, okay, we can build around these pieces. And I think Graham and Rozier, but Graham especially, is that starting pieces, and then we'll see what happens with the contracts as they move along.
I agree. Just one little tidbit I want to throw in there. One guy I'm looking forward to seeing next year, because this Charlotte team is pretty much done. I want to see what Malik Monk does. He
Yeah,
got suspended. I think that's a guy that can make this type of leap with increased minutes. I think that's kind of another bright spot that they have kind of in their back pocket there.
I'm worried about Monk because I mean the PEDs thing. Like I was like, oh God, really? Like I wasn't happy about that. But I also think that, yeah, I think he played a lot better this year. But I
Hmm.
also feel like he was that player this year that needed to make that leap. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how confident I am with him yet. Like he's a good piece to that young core, but right now I think Devonte Graham is just a lot more valuable at this moment than
Oh
Monk.
yeah, no, yeah. I think right now he's more valuable. I'm just saying next year I think Monk is gonna make this jump, and that's just personal,
Mm-hmm.
bias probably because I like the kid in college and I think he can score pretty good, and I think maybe he just needed a couple years to adapt. Coming out of Kentucky, pretty young, so I'm looking forward to him being kind of the Devonte Graham of next year for that team. Like you say, we're trending towards a rebuild, so I want to see what some of their younger guys have, and I think that's a guy that can make this kind of jump.
Credit to James Borrego, by the way. I mean, my God, he came into this job basically with nothing.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at what he's done with that team. It's impressive
Yeah, it
because
is.
there's literally nothing, and he's found a way to make it work
Yeah,
and
I
really
agree.
connect with his players as well, which we've seen, throughout this whole period with their virtual meetings and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Who is your coach of the year?
Um, Tying into my Dennis Schroeder kind of fandom, I went Billy Donovan just because of that three guard set. Like I said, implementing something that we haven't really seen in a while. Um, Best crunch time team, and going back to my earlier points, when we don't expect anything from OKC this year, and they turned out to be a real surprise. And I think that Billy really did a good job of kind of honing Chris Paul in. I don't want to take anything away from Chris Paul personally, but I think being in that setting, Billy did a really good job of kind of getting him to buy into what they were doing with those three guard sets. And Chris Paul said halfway through they really started to have fun, playing together. So I think Billy did a good job of, you lose Westbrook, you lose Paul George. Most guys would just kind of fold up shop. But I think he did a good job of reining those guys in and, keeping them motivated and, believing in some of those other guys that they had on the team. You get young Shea Gilgeous and older Chris Paul. Everyone's kind of shaking their head or wondering what was going to happen. But I think he did a good job of keeping those guys in line.
No, definitely. I mean, the team was really competitive, really fun, and as Chris Paul, as you said, Chris Paul said that they just were having fun, and it looked like it on the court because as they
Did
started getting chemistry throughout, the rest of the season, it just felt like, all right, this team can be competitive, and there was no reason for them not to be competitive if you look at the roster. But I think after Paul George and Russell Westbrook left, people were like, I don't know, right? I just
Yeah,
don't know about Billy Donovan, especially. And then, but you look at that roster, it's like, I mean, even Steven Adams is still solid. He wasn't as great this year as past years, but he was still solid. It's a team where I don't think that I really wonder now looking back why there was a doubt because they
yeah.
had
I
talent.
think I think a lot of it was around injury question marks. Probably,
Mm-hmm.
we Gallo has been hurt. Every year basically. So we were wondering if he was going to be able to stay healthy. Chris Paul had some injury concerns. Um, like I said, that 3 point guard set we were running, how they were going to shuffle those guys, because you get a young Shea Gilgeous who had a high upside, and then you bring in Chris Paul, who you're kind of like, well, where are they going to play together? And then you got Schroeder coming off the bench, so it gets a little jam-packed, and you're kind of like, well, who's going to be sitting, who's going to be traded, that type of thing. The other thing is I think after we saw them trade away Westbrook and Paul George, we were looking for them kind of just implode and kind of trade away everything.
Yeah.
That's probably where, and that's where I had my doubts, is because I thought they would be competitive if they kept the team together. I didn't think they were going to be as good as they were, but I thought once they started to lose a couple games, Steven Adams would be gone, Schroeder would be gone, Chris Paul would try to be moved, and then you're looking at
to the Knicks,
a
which
dismal
probably still
roster.
happen. Yeah.
So
yeah, Chris Paul could probably still be traded to the Knicks, which would be terrible for them. Knicks getting a huge contract. Anyway, so I took Frank Vogel, and so at this time last year, what were we talking about with the Lakers?
Head coach.
We're talking about dysfunction as a whole. Right. We're talking about dysfunction. We were talking about a team that just didn't have any direction. Rob Pelinka looked lost. And yeah, bringing in AD definitely changed the culture. But for him to work as well as he did with LeBron and AD, and to for LeBron to trust him to coach his team, because that was the most unnatural hire. We're like, where's Tyronn Lue? Right? We were like, what?
I think
but
it
worked.
That's probably why I'm a little bit more, agreeing with you here, is because you have to look at it from the aspect that no one really wanted, per se, Frank Vogel there. He's a defensive-minded coach and all this kind of stuff, and we were all looking for Ty Lue. But I think you make a good point that even, LeBron was probably like, Frank Vogel, that's really where we're going, So for him to be able to, kind of come in and step in and say, I'm going to be the guy. And also, I think what gets lost in that, I don't know if you were going to mention this, but, he had to hire Jason Kidd on, which,
right.
By all reports, some other guys didn't want to do that. So it was big of him to kind of go all in and say, you know what, if they're going to let me go for Jason Kidd later on, that is what it is, but I'm willing to accept it right now.
Yeah, that was weird, where I was like, are they seriously going to fire Frank Vogel like halfway through the year? Like, is this what LeBron is now? He's just a coach. I was like, come on, guys. Are you
I'll be honest. I was worried.
But I was like honestly, Jason Kidd just feels like an assistant coach for me. He doesn't feel like a head coach. And in Brooklyn, he wasn't great. Let's be honest. That team was, a mess when he came on. And then the Bucks, Giannis was better when he left.
Yep.
It's just a fact. Giannis wanted him. I get it, but this team was much better when he left. He fits on this team because he's an assistant coach at heart. He's an assistant coach that can help guys like LeBron because, again, as I talked about, LeBron loves having guys in the building, even on the coaching staff, that has playoff experience. Jason Kidd was incredible as a player, right? So
yeah,
that's part of it as well, I think.
I want to ask you, how much of, if any, do you think Frank Vogel played a key in Anthony Davis being Defensive Player of the Year or a candidate for it? Do you think that his system and the way he coaches and the way he wants to operate really helped him, or do you think it was more AD?
I see. This is one of the weirdest things for me. So the Lakers went from last year being the most dysfunctional team to when that trade happened, everyone was like, this team's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, what happened? One player literally changed from the Browns, the gosh dang Patriots dynasty. Like, what happened? What happened in a span of one day? And it's like the way for this team to work had to be Frank Vogel, because this building was in dysfunction a year ago. That's kind of what I point to. And then him coming in with that system, like for AD and LeBron to work. Remember, you had doubts when you came on the show when we did our preview, and you were like, "This is not going to work."
Yeah, I'll be the first one to admit I was completely wrong about this. I thought this was going to implode halfway through the year.
And I told you this is going to work. It is going to work, and there has to be credit to Frank Vogel for that. I don't know how much.
I also think key with Frank Vogel is I think he played a key in bringing in a guy like Avery Bradley and stuff, and these real kind of defensive pieces that I think get lost in the fold in that LA kind of mix. I think that was one of the most underrated signings of the year. And I'll be honest, when they said he was going to start and stuff, I was like, wow, Avery Bradley.
That was weird for me too. I'm still a little weirded out by it.
Yeah,
His
and
impact is there, but it's not.
Dwight Howard had a bounce back defensive year, rebounding, that kind of thing. I
Yeah.
think this is the type of guy, like you said, that kind of brought a toughness to this kind of Lakers team that they didn't previously have.
And let's talk about Dwight for a second. I mean, the guy figured himself out.
Yeah,
Like,
he did.
my God.
That to me was the biggest shock. When I saw that signing, I was like, wow, they're really doing this again after the whole, 2010 with Steve Nash.
It was 2013, 2012, 2013.
Yeah, I was like, wow, they're really going after this again. But I'll give credit to Dwight. He really seemed to kind of, and I didn't think he could, but step into kind of a more of a reserve role. But I think him in that role is hugely effective when he doesn't have to be the guy, the center that everyone is, has expected from him since he left Orlando. When he can just be a reserve, he's a really good piece to have.
He's finally on a team where he feels valued. Washington, no value. Memphis, no value. LA, when he was first there, basically no value, just a cancer, basically. No one wanted him, and now finally he's kind of found his spot. All right, first team. Luka, Harden, LeBron, Giannis, Rudy Gobert. For me, who do you have?
I'm with you all the way until I went Jokic first team.
Center. Okay, so here's my thought with Jokic. He had a terrible first 2 months. His first 2 months were terrible. Like, he was not Jokic for the first 2 months. And there was a period early on in this season where everyone was freaking out about Denver because Jokic wasn't being Jokic. He didn't play a full season in terms of talent-wise. I think it took him 2 months to kind of get in shape, get ready to go. I don't think – he's on this list, but he's not a first-teamer because I think he didn't come into this season really ready to go.
Yeah, I'm valuing his stardom according to that Denver team. I think he's the biggest piece on that Denver team.
Oh, obviously, no question.
I don't think that Jamal Murray is as good as people think he is. I think Jokic carries a lot of weight, and I think you're right. He started off really slow, but I think he needed that to be able to understand that he needs to be the guy for that team. He can't just, sit back and kind of let the other guys.
That got guys like Murray.
Murray, and
Gary Harris, whatever.
He needs to be the guy for that team. He can't wait for Michael Porter to develop. He has to be the guy for that team. That's to me why I put him there, is just because of he finally was the guy that we needed him to be towards the end of the year. He was finally trending in that direction where he knew that he had to step up and lead the team.
Yeah.
And to me also, I'm not willing to put Rudy or someone like that on first team just because I feel like he lacks so much offense.
Here's the deal.
And Jokic has his problems defensively. I'm not gonna say that he started out of shape and stuff, but I just feel that he has so much more of an impact on his team. Not that Rudy doesn't. I just like we were saying earlier, with defense kind of being a lost trend in the NBA, I feel like it's less value for me.
Here's the thing. This center position, the picks that you can have, and I've looked through, so many people's first teams just to sort of get an idea of, how this could look, because this is like my first time ever doing this.
Yeah.
But center's hard because
center's really hard.
Because here's the deal. AD is not a center. Mm-hmm. You cannot put him at center in this. You cannot put LeBron James at guard. You can't do that. So because you can't do that, there's only maybe 3 or 4 guys that really are pure centers that you can pick.
Exactly. That the group you can pick from is so small anyway. That's why I feel like it can differ so much with center, is because like you said, you can't slide a guy like AD into a center spot in this type of thing.
Yeah.
So it makes it hard, but I think that's also why there's probably some differing opinions on these centers. But
Second,
other than that, first team, I'm
you're good.
100% with you. Yeah.
Second team: Lillard, Beal, Kawhi, AD, and Jokic.
Ooh, there's a guy I didn't really think about, Bradley Beal, and he had a really good year. That's
So here are a
probably
couple of guys that I was thinking about here: Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. And that's where I had a tough time, but I went with Beal. Again, maybe a bit of bias fantasy team, but it doesn't matter. I think that Washington, they had a case to make the playoffs. It wasn't incredible, but Beal makes this team run. Like it does. Like John Wall not being there, like he's in a terrible spot. It sucks, because we know how great of a player he is because we watch him, but not a lot of casual fans watch the Washington Wizards. The guy's
yeah.
a great player.
He is really good, and that's one guy I don't even have on my third team, so I probably messed that up a little bit. But
I don't think you did because the guard position's so messed up. Like
yeah, but
you could do whatever with that.
I continued my OKC love, and I put Chris Paul on the second team.
That's actually perfect.
I
don't have a problem with
rewarded
that.
him for that like kind of leadership role that he took on, and being an all-star and all that really played a key in it for me. So I kind of rewarded him for his standings and his leadership and all that kind of thing, being the guy on that team.
Here's a guy I feel bad about putting on the second team. Kawhi Leonard. He doesn't deserve to be on any of these teams. He doesn't. And it's because he just doesn't play enough games. The guy's he's the load management guy. I mean, he doesn't obviously I'm going to put him in here because he's Kawhi. Like, it's kind of the hype train with him.
The talent level is too much not to, but yeah, it's hard to when he's like
not
you said,
playing as much as he should.
Not playing, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went Dame, Chris Paul, Kawhi, AD, and then my center for second team was Embiid.
Yeah. I have no Sixers on here. I avoided the Sixers completely. I had Simmons and I took him off.
Really?
I don't like the Sixers. I'm frustrated with the Sixers every time I watch them. They're legit. Like I watched legit. The team I watched the most this year. So I watched the Lakers and the Clippers, and then I watched the Sixers. And every time I watch it, it frustrates me to no end. It's like people with the Houston Rockets. It frustrates. It's like, how does this even work? Like Embiid was hurt for a good portion of the year. Simmons went off. And when Simmons gets hurt and Embiid goes off, like, what is happening?
They can't work together.
What is happening? Like, legit, it frustrated me to no end.
Yeah, they're a pretty frustrating team to watch just because I think it's a little bit clunky. I think there's a little bit too much big there,
Mm-hmm.
But that's probably a discussion for another day between you and me. I think we've had the debate of Simmons.
We'll get there when we talk about the
Simmons or Embiid a couple of times. So
right. We'll if you guys haven't heard that, we'll get to that as we go along with the podcast. But for this, we'll just focus on the teams. But yeah, I just have a tough time putting Sixers on here.
Yeah, I went Embiid, like I said, because of the skill level, offensively and defensively. And then also I think he kind of did the same thing that Jokic did, where, Shaq got on him a little bit earlier in the year and was telling him, you got to be the guy for this.
And then he does that for a week, and then he becomes regular Embiid. He doesn't know what he is.
He's a little bit inconsistent, but when he's there, it's so good. It's hard for me to leave him off of. But
I'll be honest. He's not there more than he is.
Yeah,
he's not there more often than not.
I agree.
And that's what's so frustrating.
That is frustrating because when you see that type of build and that type of skill level, you want him to be,
Yeah. And to Damian Lillard as well, I wanted to touch on him. Here's the thing. Lillard was kind of that team this year. McCollum didn't have the most incredible season compared to what he normally has. Lillard was kind of that whole team there in that playoff push, and he really wanted to make the playoffs with a team that was filled with, Carmelo they had to bring in. They just had so many injuries to their younger pieces. A team that made the Western Conference Finals last year, that team was basically gone this year. Lillard played to such an incredible level. He had a stretch where he just went insane.
Yeah, I mean, what was he averaging, like 40 points there for a while?
Something like that, for like a month.
Yeah, for like a month, he was averaging like 40 every night.
And same with Harden, too, like for a month or two there, like 35 or something like that.
Yeah. But Dame's always been a guy that gets kind of lost in the fold when you look at the bigger picture, all-star, starts or making the team. He's always got lost. He's finally getting the recognition I think he deserves because he's always been a guy that, puts up good numbers. His team's always solid. They haven't always been great. I think last year was a surprise the most that they made the Western Conference Finals. But what I love most about him is just the loyalty aspect. He said if he can't win in Portland, he doesn't want to go somewhere else to win. A guy with that kind of attitude to me speaks volumes just because he's willing to work with the guys he's got. And he's not going to complain about it, and to me, that's why it was big for him this year to really not say anything. He's always said, let's keep the team together. Let's keep the team together. This was the year that most people by accounts were saying, okay, maybe it's time to break up him and CJ, and get off some of that money and get some younger pieces.
I mean, they paid Lillard a major contract. They're not going to be able to move that at this point. So.
No, I'm talking about CJ.
Oh, it's CJ, yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, so I think just the production level that he's been having and to not ever say a word about, head coach, management, other players on the team, it's a guy you basically have to root for. You know what I mean?
Here's the thing that makes me sad about the Blazers. It's that for Lillard and McCollum to get their more recognition that they deserve, they need a third star there, and they're just not going to have it.
That's why I think that you probably do have to break them up. I think you try and move off CJ, and you get a piece that you can. They really need a wing badly. Mm-hmm. They really need a guy that they can kind of, swap defensive positions and offensive positions where he can run in that 2, 3, or 4 range. Mm-hmm. A really good wing. But
here's what I proposed, and I proposed that all season. Obviously, this trade's gone now because this contract's going to be off the books for them this season. But I really wanted to see the Whiteside Kevin Love trade happen. Yeah. I really thought that if they made that deal and maybe added in a couple first-round picks, because who cares? They don't need the picks. I think seeing McCollum, Lillard, and I think Carmelo actually played a pretty important role for them this year. And then you have Kevin Love. I think this team has a different view about him and a different excitement. I'll tell you what, if Love was with Portland, I think it would create a lot of excitement in the NBA, especially here on the West Coast.
It would, and especially Love being back in, his home state. There's probably some comfort there for him getting back to winning team, I should say. I don't know why they didn't try and move off Whiteside. I don't really see. I understand you wanted to try and push for the playoffs, but Nurk is coming back, and it just seems like kind of a wasted chance, like you said, to get someone like Love or something like that. Pick up another guy that you can build around, because I don't see, like you said, now that Whiteside's off the books, I don't know how you're going to be able to bring another piece in now. It's kind of it was a weird scenario for me.
I think Whiteside was productive, but Love would have been a lot more productive long term because he's on a bigger deal. You're not going to get anybody major in free agency anyway. Exactly. You might as well just pull the trigger.
Exactly. I think long term, you look at, okay, maybe we don't make the playoffs this year if we lose Whiteside, but next year with Love, CJ, Dame, you get Nurk back, Zach Collins is back. You have a good group there that you can run with, where Hassan was productive, but now you lost him for nothing.
He's kind of like a smaller version of Andre Drummond, where he's a rebound focused guy, and he's incredible at that. But that's not going to, as we've seen with Drummond, unfortunately, that just doesn't get you to the playoffs.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how much Cleveland was asking for. Maybe they were asking for, a boatload for Love. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I think the only way the money would have worked is Whiteside, I think. Yeah, that's the only way the money would have worked. So I would have put Whiteside in a couple of picks. But I wonder if they even offered it. Because I really don't think Portland went out and even did anything, at least from what I've heard.
That to me would be so odd for you to not even explore that. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you were to not even ask, it would be one thing if they were like, we want 3 first-rounders and Zach Collins too. You know what I mean? Then you're like, whoa, no way. But for you to not even look, maybe they would have, a
Here's the thing
version
with
of
Kevin
what
Love too. Here's the thing with Kevin Love too. The reality of the situation is no one wanted him because people were
Yeah,
too afraid of the contract. But the only team that could have feasibly made the contract work was Portland.
exactly. It was like it was the only thing that could have happened. So that's why it's so odd that it didn't happen, is
Yeah.
because we were all looking at it and like, this is perfect. It's going to line up perfect for it to happen.
And it would have been great for Cleveland too because they just get that money off the books and they can restart because most of their money is coming off the books this year anyway.
Exactly.
It,
And they get a fresh restart. Portland can keep trying to do what they're doing because, like you said, they're not bringing anyone else in. They're tapped. So
yeah,
this is the only way you're going to be able to bring in an influential piece.
yeah. I don't know. Again, based on what I've seen, I forgot to wait. Actually, never mind. I do have a center on here. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't know if they explored it or not, but I think more likely than not, nobody explored Kevin Love. I think he was available and nobody explored him because people were too afraid of the contract. I
Yeah.
think it was more of a contract thing than anything.
Maybe because, I mean, when you look at what Detroit got for Drummond, it made me wonder what the whole market looked like.
I
Because
don't think Drummond had any market.
no, but that's what I'm saying. If there's no one like looking for these guys, you just settle for a second rounder. It makes me wonder what the market even was for a lot of these other guys. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where maybe no one even asked about Love, like you're saying.
Yeah. For sure. It was a weird market for these type of players like Drummond, like Love. It was just strange.
It was.
All right, third team. Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, Pascal Siakam, Jason Tatum, and Bam is my third team.
That's a pretty good team. I went Westbrook, Trae Young, Tatum. I went Jimmy Butler instead of
Okay.
Pascal Siakam, and then I had Gobert from.
Okay. I love Jimmy Butler. I feel bad that he was off this list. I think Tatum was incredible this year. Like after the All-Star break, he just went off. Here's the thing. I actually liked Westbrook this year. I did.
Yeah,
Here's the thing. Once they made that switch and got rid of Capella, I was like, okay.
Westbrook looked finally like we thought Westbrook should look with that
Right.
with that space gone.
But I didn't see enough of it. And there were some weeks where it was great, and there were some weeks where it was horrible.
Yeah,
I mean, it
they
was
they had some pretty low lows in the middle of that.
I I mean, we'll see how it looks in Orlando because we're going to get finally another look at it again in the more playoff setting. But I'll tell you what, if this doesn't work, I don't know what Houston's going to do. Because
Yeah,
I think Harden's great, but this team doesn't feel like a championship team to me at all. It just feels like they're testing stuff out. They're trying to be more unique. And I think they're still kind of holding on to the Golden State loss a few years ago. I just don't know what to make of it.
yeah. That's where you and me differ because I've always been kind of a Houston guy, and I think this team is a dark horse for the NBA Finals. I really think that this team has some potential, and I think they're a team that can really sneak up on some other teams just because of the fact that, like you said, no one's really talking about them this year after this whole Corona,
Right.
thing. So I think it'll be really beneficial for them to get a restart, and I think this is the one year that they're going to sneak up on people because I don't hear anyone talking about them, but also people are forgetting that they completely revamped their whole team.
No, it's
Um,
revamped, but it's revamped in the most weird way possible.
yeah, but I think it really does work for them.
It does, but again, as we talked about, there was one week where it was great, and the next it was terrible. They can't have a bad week in the NBA playoffs. They can have a bad week in Orlando because if they have a bad week in Orlando, they're going to get screwed.
I know, but what happens if they catch fire? That's what I'm saying. If they
Right.
catch fire, that you can't. That's also what was beneficial, I think. Um, it's this is going to sound weird for me to say, but the whole pandemic actually I think benefited them because there's less opportunities to play against them. It's more of a advantage to them now than it
Hmm.
is if teams have been playing them for the last 2 months.
And you know what's weird about small ball lineups? This is something that I've, when Miami started doing this back in 2013, what was weird is like, it's not like a center can just back down PJ Tucker because as we talked about, there's no centers that are really back to the basket centers. It's weird because if you put this lineup in the 90s with Michael Jordan
They
or
get
something
killed.
like that, it would get creamed.
Yeah, they
But
would
in,
get killed.
in where we're
But
at now,
there's no centers unless the only problem I see them having is if they match up with Denver. I think
right?
Jokic would be a real problem for them.
Oh,
Other than that,
100%.
I think they can handle it.
Yeah, it's
But
so weird
I've
for
been
me.
high on Houston since last year. That's where you and me have a lot of our debates from. Is I've been all in on Houston, and they're going all in, like we said with the revamped roster. So it'll be interesting to see if it doesn't work out this year, like you said, because I wonder what pieces you try to move, if you can move it all, to try and kind of retool it again.
So how I feel about Philly is how I feel about Houston. They're good, but they're not there.
So
They're not.
it's a love hate for you.
It's like I get it. It works, but when it doesn't work, it's horrible. Like when it doesn't work, it looks like frustration in a bottle.
Like hot garbage, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like frustration in a bottle. It's so weird.
Yeah, that's the thing, is just too inconsistent. But like I'm saying, when either of those teams are on, though,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
It's but again, like
But
if
how often is it on?
right, and that's what I'm frustrated with always. Yeah, I had Bam Adebayo in here. You had Jimmy Butler. I love this Heat team this year. That was one of my favorite teams this year. This Heat team with all these young pieces that they have, Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, for example, and of course Bam had a breakout year this year. There's a good chance he could have been in the most improved discussion as well. This Miami team with Jimmy Butler, I think Butler's finally found his spot, his team that he can work well with. This team has a chance to be really competitive for the next 3-4 seasons, including this year as well.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of like the fit with Bam here on the third team. He was a guy I had runner up on most improved, like you were saying. Um, a really good, and I think a lot of us were expecting that from him this year with the bigger role with the Sangan. So it was good to see him step up into that role. But going back to that Miami as a whole, I think Jimmy finally did find a spot where he can be the guy, and I think he finally appreciates the younger talent around him for what it is. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Um, Spoelstra's always done a good job,
Yeah,
and I
Spo's
think
great.
he did a really good job of, like you said, bringing in some of this kind of talent that no one really thought about. Like a Duncan Robinson, was kind of just a lost cause, once he got into the league for a while. But he found a real niche, obviously with his shooting, and Kendrick Nunn being undrafted. You know what I mean? I think Spoelstra did a really good job with his team, and I think Pat Riley's done a really good job with this team ever since those dynasty Miami Heat teams left. I think they had their one or two down years, but he's done a good job of reconstructing it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I really love Spo. I think he's a great coach. He fits this team. Jimmy Butler loves him. I mean, he's just like after those Miami Heat years, it's like he's the guy, right? Him and Pat Riley, they know what they're doing, and it showed with this team.
It really did, and it should be, because Miami should be a hot spot for these players to want to go, and I think it finally is again.